The crack of a whip echoed across the dusty trail as Olivia Osborne clutched the edge of the wagon, her knuckles white against the weathered wood. The year was 1873, and the promise of a new life in Oregon territory seemed to stretch as endlessly as the horizon before her. The wagon train had been traveling for 6 weeks now, crossing the rugged terrain of Idaho territory, and Olivia had begun to wonder if they would ever reach their destination. "Keep moving," shouted Jeremiah Blackwell, the wagon master, his voice as harsh as the scorching sun overhead. "We need to make it to Snake River by nightfall." Olivia nodded, though her entire body ached from the constant jostling of the wagon. At 22, she had left behind everything familiar in Missouri after her parents' death, determined to claim the land her uncle had left her in Oregon. She was the only unmarried woman traveling alone in the train of 12 wagons, which had earned her both respect and suspicion from her fellow travelers. "Miss Osborne," called Martha Wilson from the wagon behind hers, "will you join us for supper tonight?" "My Robert caught some fine trout this morning." "That would be lovely, thank you," Olivia replied, offering a tired smile. The wagon train continued its slow progress through the afternoon, the wheels creaking under the weight of all Olivia's worldly possessions. The landscape had changed as they'd traveled, with the flat plains giving way to more treacherous rocky terrain. Snake River was still a day's journey away, despite Blackwell's insistence they would reach it by nightfall. As the sun began to dip below the mountains in the distance, Blackwell called for the wagons to circle for the night. Olivia climbed down carefully from her perch, stretching her legs as she prepared to tend to her oxen. "Let me help you with that," said a deep voice behind her. Olivia turned to see Thomas Vance, one of the cowboys who had joined their train as a scout and hunter 2 weeks prior. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the sky just before a storm. At perhaps 26 or 27, he was younger than most of the men with the train, but there was a quiet confidence about him that suggested experience beyond his years. "Thank you, Mr. Vance, but I can manage," she said, though she appreciated his offer. Most of the other men treated her as if her independence was an oddity or a temporary condition to be remedied by marriage. "I don't doubt that, Miss Osborne," he replied with a slight tip of his hat. "But even the strongest among us could use a helping hand now and then." Something in his tone respect rather than condescension made her pause. "Very well, then. I would appreciate the assistance." Together they unhitched the oxen and led them to water. Thomas moved with an easy grace that spoke of a lifetime spent working with animals. "You've been traveling alone all this way?" he asked as they worked. "Yes. My parents passed last winter from fever. I'm heading to claim my uncle's homestead near Portland." Thomas nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Brave undertaking for anyone, let alone a woman." Olivia finished, a defensive edge to her voice. "I was going to say person traveling alone," he corrected gently. "The trail shows no favor to man or woman when it comes to its dangers." Olivia felt a flush of embarrassment at her quick assumption. "You're right, of course. It hasn't been easy, but I've managed so far." "That you have," he agreed with a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Though I suspect you're tougher than half the men in this company." Their conversation was interrupted by Blackwell's sharp command for everyone to gather around the main fire. As they walked toward the center of the circled wagons, Olivia noticed how Thomas kept a respectful distance, yet remained close enough that others would note their association. "We'll break camp at first light," Blackwell announced, his gaze sweeping over the tired travelers. "The trail ahead gets rougher before it gets better, so secure your loads properly tonight. Anyone who can't keep up will be left behind." We can't afford delays if we want to cross the mountains before the first snow." A murmur rippled through the group. Blackwell was known for his harsh efficiency, but his words tonight carried an unusual edge of impatience. "Is there trouble ahead?" asked Samuel Cooper, an older man traveling with his son's family. "Nothing we can't handle if we keep moving," Blackwell replied dismissively. "Just do as I say." As the gathering dispersed, Thomas caught Olivia's eye. "Blackwell seems more on edge than usual." "I noticed that too," she admitted quietly. "I've heard rumors of increased bandit activity in this territory." Thomas nodded, his expression serious. "I've scouted ahead and haven't seen signs of trouble, but it pays to be cautious. Make sure your rifle is loaded tonight, Miss Osborne." "Always, Mr. Vance," she replied, appreciating his concern without the typical male insistence on taking over her protection. Later, as Olivia sat with the Wilson family around their fire, she found herself scanning the perimeter for Thomas. He was standing watch at the edge of camp, his tall figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. There was something comforting about his presence, though she had only known him for a short time. Martha Wilson followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. "That Thomas Vance is quite the handsome fellow, isn't he?" Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was merely observing his vigilance. It's reassuring to have such attentive scouts." "Of course, dear," Martha replied, not bothering to hide her amusement. "Though I've noticed he seems particularly attentive where you're concerned." "Martha," her husband Robert chided gently, "don't embarrass the young lady." Olivia ate her meal in silence after that, pondering Martha's words. Had Thomas been paying her special attention? She had been so focused on surviving the journey that she had scarcely considered such possibilities. The night passed uneventfully, and true to Blackwell's word, the camp stirred before dawn. Olivia was checking her wagon's wheels when Thomas appeared with a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering the tin cup. "It's going to be a demanding day." "Thank you," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the hot drink. "I'll be riding ahead with Blackwell today," Thomas informed her. "The terrain gets tricky about 5 miles on. Keep your wagon toward the middle of the train if you can." She nodded, touched by his concern. "I will. Be safe, Mr. Vance." "Thomas," he corrected with a small smile. "After all this time on the trail, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you?" "Then you must call me Olivia," she replied, returning his smile. "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt on his lips. "It suits you." With a tip of his hat, he was gone, mounting his chestnut gelding and riding to the front where Blackwell was already issuing orders to the other scouts. The wagon train set out as the first rays of sun painted the eastern sky in hues of gold and pink. Olivia found herself thinking about Thomas more than she cared to admit, as she guided her oxen along the increasingly rugged path. There was something about him that felt different from other men. She had known a genuine respect coupled with a gentle strength that drew her in, despite her determination to remain independent. By midday, the trail had narrowed considerably, with a steep ravine to one side and towering rock formations to the other. The wagons were forced to travel single file, and progress slowed to a crawl as each driver carefully navigated the treacherous path. Olivia was about halfway through this narrow passage when disaster struck. A sudden movement in the rocks above startled her oxen. The lead animal jerked sideways, pulling the wagon dangerously close to the edge of the ravine. Olivia pulled hard on the reins, trying to correct their course, but the wagon wheel caught on a jutting rock. The impact threw her from her seat. She landed hard on the rocky ground, pain shooting through her right leg as it twisted beneath her. The wagon continued forward a few feet before someone managed to stop the oxen. Olivia tried to stand but collapsed as her leg gave way, a cry of pain escaping her lips. "Olivia!" Thomas's voice cut through the confusion as he dismounted in a fluid motion, rushing to her side. "Don't move." His hands were gentle as he examined her leg, his face grim. "It's broken," he said quietly. "The bone hasn't come through the skin, but it's definitely broken." Blackwell pushed through the gathering crowd. "What's the holdup? We need to keep moving." "Miss Osborne is injured," Thomas explained, standing to face the wagon master. "Her leg is broken. She needs medical attention and rest." Blackwell's expression hardened as he assessed the situation. "We can't stop here. It's too exposed." He glanced at Olivia, then back at the line of wagons. "Put her in the Wilson wagon. We'll deal with it when we make camp." "She shouldn't be moved far or jostled," Thomas argued. "A makeshift splint now and then gentle transport to the next suitable location where she can recover." "Recover?" Blackwell scoffed. "That could take weeks." "We're not stopping for weeks because one person was careless." Olivia bit her lip against both the pain and the accusation. "I wasn't careless," she managed to say. "Something spooked the oxen from the rocks above." Blackwell dismissed her explanation with a wave of his hand. "The fact remains, we can't delay the entire train for one person. Those are the rules everyone agreed to when we started this journey." The other travelers shifted uncomfortably, torn between compassion for Olivia and the practical reality of their situation. Winter was coming, and being stranded in the mountains could mean death for all of them. "Then I'll stay with her," Thomas declared, his voice firm. "Get her to Snake River when she's able to travel. The rest of you can continue on." "Don't be ridiculous, Vance," Blackwell snapped. "You're one of our best scouts. We need you." "You have Peterson and Miller," Thomas countered. "They know the trail as well as I do." A tense silence fell over the group as Blackwell's face darkened with anger. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold. "Fine. You want to risk your life for her, that's your choice. But I won't spare supplies or a wagon. You're on your own." Martha Wilson stepped forward. "We can spare some food and medical supplies at least." Several others murmured agreement, and Blackwell knew better than to argue with the collective will of the travelers. "One day's rations each, no more," he conceded grudgingly. "And anything you can carry on one horse. The wagon belongs to the company." Olivia tried to protest, the pain in her leg momentarily overshadowed by the realization of what was happening. "Thomas, no, you can't sacrifice your place for me. I'll manage somehow." With a broken leg, alone in bandit territory, he shook his head firmly. "I've made my decision, Olivia." While the others prepared to continue their journey, Thomas carefully fashioned a splint for Olivia's leg, using sturdy branches and strips torn from his own spare shirt. His hands were sure and gentle as he worked, and Olivia found herself studying his face, the concentration in his eyes, the determined set of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead as he bent over her injured leg. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, wincing as he tightened the bindings. He paused, looking up to meet her gaze. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I couldn't live with myself if I left you behind." There was something in his eyes that suggested more than just moral obligation. But before Olivia could decipher it, Martha Wilson approached with a bundle of supplies. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it should help until you reach Snake River. There's a doctor there, Dr. Harrison. He's a good man." "Thank you, Martha," Olivia said, clasping the older woman's hand. "For everything." "You take care of her," Martha instructed Thomas firmly. "She's a special one." "I know," he replied quietly, and something in his tone made Olivia's heart skip a beat. Within an hour, the wagon train was ready to depart, leaving Thomas and Olivia behind. Robert Wilson had helped Thomas construct a travois that could be pulled by his horse, providing a relatively comfortable way to transport Olivia without putting weight on her injured leg. As the last wagon disappeared around a bend in the trail, Olivia felt a mixture of fear and strange anticipation. She was alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, dependent on him in a way she had never been dependent on anyone since her parents died. "Are you comfortable?" Thomas asked, adjusting the blankets around her on the travois. "As comfortable as one can be with a broken leg," she replied, attempting a brave smile. "We'll take it slow," he assured her. "Snake River is about 15 miles from here. We should reach it in 3 days, moving at a pace that won't aggravate your injury." Olivia nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of their situation. "Thomas, I don't know how to thank you for this. You've given up everything. I haven't given up anything important," he interrupted gently. "The train will reach Oregon whether I'm with them or not, but you wouldn't have made it alone, and that's something I couldn't accept. Still, it's an enormous sacrifice." Thomas checked the knots securing the travois one last time before mounting his horse. "Let's focus on getting you to Snake River. We can discuss debts of gratitude once you're seeing a proper doctor." They set out at a walking pace, the travois sliding smoothly over the rocky ground. Thomas led his horse carefully, choosing the least bumpy path possible. Even so, each jolt sent spikes of pain through Olivia's leg, though she tried not to show it. As the day wore on, the pain became harder to bear, and Thomas noticed her increasingly pale face. "We should stop and rest," he decided, guiding his horse to a small clearing near a stream. He helped Olivia from the travois to a comfortable spot under a tree, propping her injured leg carefully on his rolled blanket. Then he busied himself collecting water and preparing a small fire. "You seem very capable in the wilderness," Olivia observed, grateful for the distraction of conversation. Thomas smiled as he worked. "I grew up in the Colorado Territory. My father was a trapper and guide. He taught me everything he knew about surviving out here." "And your mother?" A shadow crossed his face. "She died when I was 12, cholera. After that, it was just my father and me until he was killed in a hunting accident 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "It seems we've both known our share of loss." Thomas nodded, adding small twigs to the growing flame. "Loss shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. That's something my father used to say." "Wise man." "He was," Thomas agreed, a fond smile briefly lighting his features. "Though he'd be the first to deny it. What about your family?" "You mentioned your parents passed last winter." Olivia nodded, absently rubbing her arms against a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "They ran a small general store in Springfield. The fever took them both within days of each other. My uncle in Oregon was my only remaining family, but by the time I received word of my parents' deaths and wrote to him, he had also passed away. His lawyer wrote that he had left his homestead to me, since he had no children of his own." "So you decided to claim it, even though you'd never been there?" "What choice did I have?" Olivia replied. "The store had been mortgaged to expand just before the fever hit. There was nothing left for me in Springfield but debt and pitying glances." Thomas considered this as he arranged their meager supplies. "It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind for an uncertain future." "Or desperation," she countered with a wry smile. "Perhaps a bit of both," he conceded, handing her a cup of water. "But mostly courage, I think." As the day faded into evening, they shared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. Olivia found herself relaxing in Thomas's company, despite the pain in her leg and the precariousness of their situation. There was something calming about his presence, a steady reliability that made her feel safe even in the middle of the wilderness. "How did you come to join our wagon train?" she asked, as Thomas added more wood to their fire. "I was working as a guide for a survey team near Fort Hall when I ran into Blackwell. He'd lost one of his scouts to fever and offered me good pay to help get the train to Oregon." Thomas poked at the fire thoughtfully. "I wasn't particularly impressed with Blackwell, but the people in the train seemed decent, and I was heading west anyway." "And now you've thrown away that pay to help a woman you barely know," Olivia said softly. Thomas's eyes met hers across the fire, their blue depths reflecting the dancing flames. "I know enough," he said simply. Something in his gaze made her heart flutter strangely, and she looked away, suddenly conscious of their isolation and proximity. "We should get some rest," she suggested. "Tomorrow will be challenging." Thomas nodded, helping her adjust her position for sleep before rolling out his own blanket a respectful distance away. "Call if you need anything in the night," he said. "I'm a light sleeper." "Thank you, Thomas, for everything." He tipped his hat with a small smile. "Sleep well, Olivia." Despite her discomfort, Olivia found herself drifting off to the sound of Thomas's steady breathing and the soft crackling of the fire. Her last conscious thought was how strange it was to feel so secure in the company of a man she had known for such a short time. The next morning brought new challenges as Olivia's leg had stiffened painfully overnight. Thomas examined the splint with a frown. "The swelling's worse," he observed. "We need to keep it elevated as much as possible during travel." He rebuilt the travois with extra padding and a raised support for her leg, working with quick efficiency that spoke of his wilderness experience. By mid-morning they were moving again, slower than before, as Thomas carefully navigated the uneven terrain. The day was hot, the August sun beating down mercilessly as they made their way toward Snake River. Olivia tried to distract herself from the pain by studying the landscape, the distant mountains with their snow-capped peaks, the scattered pines providing occasional shade, the hawks circling lazily in the vast blue sky. "Tell me about your homestead," Thomas suggested as they stopped for a brief rest near a small spring. "What do you know about it?" Olivia sipped the cool water gratefully. "Not much. My uncle's letters described good soil, a small orchard, and a creek running through the property. The house is modest but sound. He raised sheep mostly, I believe." "Do you know anything about raising sheep?" Thomas asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Absolutely nothing," Olivia admitted with a laugh that turned into a grimace as pain shot through her leg. "But I can learn. I'm good with figures and organization from helping with the store. The rest, well, I'll manage somehow." Thomas shook his head, clearly impressed by her determination. "I believe you will." They continued their slow journey through the afternoon, stopping frequently to rest and adjust Olivia's position on the travois. Thomas proved to be not just careful but thoughtful, fashioning a sun shield from his coat to protect her from the worst of the heat. As evening approached, they found a sheltered spot to make camp. Olivia watched as Thomas efficiently set about his task securing his horse, gathering firewood, checking their surroundings for any signs of danger. There was something compelling about his quiet competence, so different from the blustering confidence many men displayed. "You're staring, Miss Osborne," he said without looking up from the fire he was building. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just appreciating your skills," she replied, flustered at being caught. "And I thought we'd agreed on first names." Thomas glanced up with a smile that transformed his serious face. "So we did, Olivia, and thank you for the compliment, though these are just basic survival skills, nothing special." "They seem special to me," she said quietly. I would be in dire straits without them, without you right now." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Even with a broken leg, you haven't complained once." "What good would complaining do?" she asked practically. "The leg is broken whether I complain or not." Thomas chuckled, the sound warm in the gathering twilight. A philosophy more people should adopt. As night fell, they shared another simple meal, rationing their supplies carefully. Olivia found herself telling Thomas about her childhood in Missouri, her dreams of someday opening a small school, the books she loved to read. In turn, he spoke of his years traveling with his father, the wonders and hardships of life in the territories, his brief stint as an army scout during conflicts with native tribes. "I left after a year," he explained, his expression troubled. "Couldn't stomach the way some of the officers treated the indigenous people. There was no honor in it." Olivia studied him in the firelight. "That couldn't have been an easy decision." "It wasn't," he admitted, "but I've found that the hardest decisions are often the right ones." "Like staying behind with a woman with a broken leg?" she asked softly. His eyes met hers across the fire. "That was actually one of the easiest decisions I've ever made." The simple honesty in his voice stirred something deep within her, a feeling she wasn't ready to name. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts as the stars appeared one by one in the vast sky above them. The night passed peacefully, but dawn brought new worries as Olivia developed a slight fever. Thomas's brow furrowed with concern as he felt her forehead. "We need to reach Snake River as soon as possible," he said, his voice tight with worry. "Infection may be setting in." Despite her protests that she was fine, Thomas insisted on increasing their pace, though he remained careful not to jostle her leg unnecessarily. The terrain had begun to change, becoming less rocky and more wooded as they descended toward the river valley. By midday, Olivia was drifting in and out of consciousness, the fever making her thoughts fuzzy and disconnected. She was vaguely aware of Thomas talking to her, urging her to stay awake, his voice a lifeline in her increasingly confused state. "Stay with me, Olivia," he pleaded, stopping to give her water. "We're getting close. Just hold on." She tried to focus on his face, on the concern in his blue eyes. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I'm just so tired." "I know," he said gently, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "But I need you to keep fighting. I'm not losing you now." There was something in the way he said it, a depth of feeling that penetrated even her fever-muddled mind. She managed a weak smile. "You won't lose me. I'm too stubborn to give up." "That's my girl," he said softly, and though the possessive endearment should have bothered her independent spirit, Olivia found it strangely comforting instead. They pushed on through the afternoon, Thomas alternating between leading his horse and riding beside the travois to check on Olivia. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, a new sound reached them, the rushing of water. "The Snake River," Thomas announced, relief evident in his voice. "We're almost there, Olivia. The settlement is just beyond that ridge." Olivia tried to respond, but the fever had sapped her strength. She could only manage a faint nod, as Thomas urged his tired horse forward with renewed determination. The settlement of Snake River came into view just as the last rays of sunlight painted the valley in gold and amber. It was larger than Olivia had expected, perhaps 30 buildings clustered along a main street, with smaller dwellings scattered on the outskirts. Smoke rose from chimneys, and lanterns were being lit as evening approached. Thomas headed directly for a building with a small sign identifying it as Dr. Harrison's office. Before he could even call out, the door opened and a middle-aged man with spectacles and graying hair emerged. "What have we here?" he asked, taking in the travois and Olivia's pale face. "Broken leg 3 days ago," Thomas explained quickly. "Fever started this morning." "She needs help, doctor." The man nodded briskly. "Bring her inside. I'm Dr. Harrison." With the doctor's assistance, Thomas carefully transferred Olivia from the travois to an examination table inside. The movement sent waves of pain through her leg, drawing a whimper from her parched lips. "I'm sorry," Thomas murmured, his face anguished at causing her additional pain. "Not your fault," she managed to whisper before the darkness at the edges of her vision closed in completely. When Olivia regained consciousness, she was lying in a clean bed in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through curtained windows, suggesting it was well into the morning. Her leg was properly splinted and elevated on pillows, the pain reduced to a dull throbbing. The fever had broken, leaving her weak but clear-headed. "Welcome back," said a gentle voice from beside the bed. Olivia turned her head to see Thomas sitting in a chair, his face showing signs of exhaustion and several days' worth of stubble, but his eyes were bright with relief. "How long?" she asked, her throat dry. Thomas reached for a glass of water on the bedside table and helped her take a few sips. 2 days. The fever was high. Dr. Harrison had to rebrake and set your leg properly. He says you're lucky no sign of bone infection, though the surrounding tissue was inflamed. Olivia tried to process this information. 2 days. You've been here all that time. Thomas looked slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to be sure you were all right." Before she could respond, the door opened and Dr. Harrison entered, a kindly-looking man in his 50s with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Ah, our patient is awake," he observed with satisfaction. "How are you feeling, Miss Osborne?" "Better, thank you," she replied, "though rather weak." "That's to be expected after such a fever. Your young man here hasn't left your side for more than a few minutes since you arrived." The doctor smiled at Thomas, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "If he hadn't gotten you here when he did, things might have turned out quite differently." "He's not my—" Olivia began automatically, then paused, unsure how to categorize Thomas's relationship to her. He had saved her life, sacrificed his position with the wagon train, cared for her with unwavering dedication. What was he to her, exactly? Thomas saved her from having to finish the sentence. "I did what anyone would do in the circumstances, Doctor." Dr. Harrison gave him a knowing look. "I've practiced medicine on the frontier for 20 years, young man. I can assure you, not everyone would have done what you did." After examining Olivia thoroughly, the doctor pronounced himself satisfied with her progress. "The leg is properly set now. You'll need to stay off it entirely for at least 4 weeks, then limited weight bearing with crutches for another month or so. Complete healing will take several months." Olivia's heart sank at this news. "But the wagon train, my homestead, is still going to be there when you're healed," Thomas interjected firmly. "Your health is what matters now." Dr. Harrison nodded in agreement. "He's right. Trying to travel too soon would risk permanent damage to your leg. Now I've arranged for you to stay with Mrs. Hollister, a widow who takes in boarders. She's an excellent cook and a former nurse, so you'll be well cared for." "That's very kind, but I can't possibly afford," Olivia began, suddenly remembering her precarious financial situation. Most of her money was in her wagon, now continuing to Oregon without her. "It's been taken care of," Thomas said quietly. "For the next 2 months at least." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "Thomas, no, you've already done too much." "I can't accept, you can and you will," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "I have savings, Olivia. Let me do this." Dr. Harrison cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to discuss the arrangements. Miss Osborne, I'll check on you again this evening." Mr. Vance knows where to find me if you need anything before then." After the doctor left, Olivia turned to Thomas, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. "Why are you doing all this for me? The truth, please." Thomas was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his hands before rising to meet hers directly. "Because from the moment I joined that wagon train and saw you handling your oxen with such determination, something about you called to me. I've never met anyone like you, Olivia, so brave and independent, yet kind and thoughtful too. When Blackwell was going to abandon you, I realized I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing you again." His honesty took her breath away. "Thomas, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I'm not expecting anything from you. I just want to help you get well and reach your homestead safely. After that, whatever happens or doesn't happen between us is entirely up to you." Olivia studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the slight nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. Something warm unfurled in her chest, a feeling she had been trying to ignore since their first real conversation. "What if I don't want to wait until after?" she asked softly. Thomas's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean that these past few days, even with the broken leg and fever, have shown me what kind of man you are, Thomas Vance, and I find myself drawn to you in ways I never expected." A smile slowly spread across his face, transforming his tired features. "Are you saying you might be open to exploring whatever this is between us?" Olivia nodded, feeling suddenly shy despite her boldness. "I am. Though I warn you, I'm still determined to claim my homestead and maintain my independence." Thomas's smile widened. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Your strength and independence are part of what I admire about you." The next few weeks passed in a blur of healing and deepening connection. Mrs. Hollister, a motherly woman in her 60s, proved to be an excellent caretaker, ensuring Olivia followed the doctor's orders while allowing her enough independence to maintain her dignity. Thomas found work at the local livery stable, proving his worth quickly with his extensive knowledge of horses and tack. He visited Olivia daily, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers from the riverbank, a book borrowed from the town's small lending library, fresh baked goods from the baker who appreciated Thomas's help fixing his broken wagon. They talked for hours, learning each other's stories, dreams, and beliefs. Olivia discovered that beneath Thomas's quiet exterior lay a thoughtful mind and a compassionate heart. He had read widely despite his nomadic life, carrying books in his saddlebags and trading them along his travels. His views on the treatment of indigenous peoples and the exploitation of the land were progressive for the time, shaped by his experiences living close to nature. Thomas, in turn, was captivated by Olivia's determination and resilience. She told him about her plans for the homestead, her hope to eventually start a small school for the children of neighboring farms, her desire to create something meaningful and lasting after losing her family. "I've been thinking," Thomas said one evening as they sat on Mrs. Hollister's front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. "Once you're well enough to travel, I could escort you to your homestead. It's still a long journey from here to Portland, and the mountains can be treacherous even in good weather." Olivia considered this, absently stroking the cat that had settled in her lap. "You do that. What about your work here?" Thomas shrugged. "It was always temporary. Jameson already knows I plan to move on eventually. And after we reach the homestead." Olivia asked carefully, her heart beating faster. Thomas met her gaze steadily. "That depends on you, Olivia. I could help you get settled, make sure everything's in working order, then move on if that's what you want. Or, she prompted when he hesitated. "Or I could stay," he said simply. "If you wanted me to." The directness of his statement sent a warm flutter through her chest. "As what exactly?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, that's the question, isn't it? A neighbor, a friend, something more." "I'd be content with any of those roles, as long as I could be near you." Olivia studied him in the fading light, this man who had quite literally carried her through her darkest days, who had never once made her feel less for needing help, who looked at her with such warmth and respect in his eyes. "What if I already know what role I'd prefer?" she asked softly. Thomas's breath caught audibly. "And what would that be?" Instead of answering with words, Olivia leaned forward and gently pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but filled with promise, and when she pulled back, Thomas's expression was one of wonder and joy. "I think I could be amenable to that arrangement," he said, his voice slightly husky. Olivia laughed, the sound bright in the quiet evening. "I should hope so, Mr. Vance, considering you've been courting me quite thoroughly these past weeks." "Have I?" he asked with mock innocence. "I was merely being neighborly." "Is that what they call it these days?" she teased. Thomas captured her hand in his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "In all seriousness, Olivia, I don't want to rush you. I know independence is important to you and claiming your homestead has been your goal all along." "It still is," she assured him. "But I'm beginning to think that independence doesn't have to mean being alone. Perhaps it can also mean choosing who to share your life with, on equal terms." Thomas's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I like the sound of that." As September gave way to October, Olivia progressed from complete bed rest to moving about on crutches. Dr. Harrison was pleased with her healing, though he cautioned that the journey to Oregon would need to wait until spring. "The mountain passes will be snowed in within weeks," he explained during a checkup. "Even if your leg were fully healed, which it isn't, attempting that crossing before April or May would be foolhardy." Olivia accepted this news with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was eager to reach her homestead and begin building her new life. On the other, the prospect of spending the winter in Snake River with Thomas didn't seem like such a hardship. "We could use the time to prepare properly," Thomas suggested as they discussed their options over dinner at the town's small hotel, a rare treat he had insisted on to celebrate her first outing without Mrs. Hollister's supervision. "Gather supplies, maybe purchase a wagon and team. Make contacts for future trading. You've given this some thought," Olivia observed, touched by his careful planning. "I have," he admitted. "I want your homestead to succeed, Olivia. I want you to have the life you've dreamed of." "And what about your dreams?" she asked. "You've spent your life wandering. Won't settling in one place feel confining?" Thomas considered this, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that. My father taught me everything he knew about the land, about tracking and hunting, about survival. I've spent years applying those skills but never really putting down roots anywhere. Maybe it's time for that to change." "Because of me?" Olivia asked softly. "Partly," he acknowledged, "but also for myself. I'm nearly 28. I've seen a lot of this country, lived under the stars more nights than I can count. The thought of having a home, of building something lasting, it appeals to me more than I expected it would." The conviction in his voice reassured her. "So we stay until spring, then make for Oregon together." "Together," he agreed, reaching across the table to take her hand. The word held more meaning than either of them could articulate, but the warmth in Thomas's eyes told Olivia everything she needed to know about his intentions. As winter settled over Snake River, Olivia and Thomas fell into a comfortable routine. She had taken a position helping the schoolteacher with younger students 3 mornings a week, which provided a small income and satisfied her desire to be useful. Thomas continued working at the livery stable, earning a reputation for his skill with even the most difficult horses. They spent their evenings planning for the journey to Oregon and the development of the homestead. Thomas had connections with traders and knew which supplies would be most essential for their first year. Olivia's organizational skills came into play as she created detailed lists and budgets, determined to make the most of their limited resources. Christmas brought a light snowfall that transformed Snake River into a picturesque winter scene. Mrs. Hollister hosted a small celebration for her boarders and a few close friends, including Thomas and Dr. Harrison. The modest parlor was decorated with pine boughs and candles, filling the air with a festive scent. After dinner, as the others engaged in a lively game of charades, Thomas drew Olivia aside to the relative privacy of the small front porch. Despite the cold, the sky was clear, stars twinkling brightly above them. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple string. "Thomas, you shouldn't have," Olivia protested, though she accepted the gift with a smile. "We agreed to save our money for the homestead. This didn't cost much," he assured her. "Open it." Carefully unwrapping the package, Olivia discovered a small wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate leaf patterns. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a silver ring with a small, perfect pearl. "It was my mother's," Thomas explained softly, watching her face. "My father gave it to her when they were married. It's the only thing of hers I still have." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes wide with emotion. "Thomas?" He took her hands in his expression serious yet filled with tenderness. "Olivia Osborne, I know we've only known each other for a few months, but in that time, you've become everything to me. I love your courage, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you refuse to be defined by limitations or expectations. I love the person you are and the person you make me want to be." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer, and I understand if you want to wait until we reach Oregon and get settled. But I need you to know that I love you, and whenever you're ready, I want to make a life with you as partners, equals, building something together." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked at this man who had literally carried her through her darkest hours, who had never once made her feel weak for needing help, who saw her strength and independence as qualities to be admired rather than overcome. "I don't need to wait," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I love you, Thomas Vance. I think I've loved you since you fashioned that first splint on the trail and looked at me not with pity but with respect. Yes, I'll marry you whether it's here in Snake River or on our homestead in Oregon." Thomas's face lit with such joy that it took Olivia's breath away. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of partnership, respect, and love. The remainder of the winter passed in a blur of preparations and planning. They were married in February in Snake River's small church, with Mrs. Hollister, Dr. Harrison, and a handful of other friends in attendance. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with genuine joy and heartfelt promises. Dr. Harrison declared Olivia's leg fully healed in late March, though he cautioned her to be careful on uneven ground. By April, they had purchased a sturdy wagon, a team of oxen, and all the supplies they would need for the journey and their first months on the homestead. The morning of their departure dawned clear and bright, with the promise of spring evident in the budding trees and wildflowers dotting the roadside. The townspeople gathered to see them off, having come to regard the couple with affection during their stay. "You've got a good man there, Mrs. Hollister told Olivia as they exchanged farewell embraces. "And he's got a good woman. Take care of each other out there." "We will," Olivia promised, her eyes seeking Thomas as he made final adjustments to their wagon. He looked up as if sensing her gaze, offering a smile that still made her heart skip a beat. Dr. Harrison shook Thomas's hand firmly. "Remember what I told you about that leg of hers. No heroics for at least another month." Thomas nodded seriously. "We'll take it slow, Doctor. I've mapped out a route with plenty of stopping points." As they climbed onto the wagon seat together, Olivia felt a surge of excitement mixed with gratitude. A year ago, she had been alone, facing an uncertain future. Now she had a partner beside her, a man who had proven his love not with grand gestures but with steady, unwavering support when she needed it most. "Ready for our adventure, Mrs. Vance?" Thomas asked, his blue eyes warm with love as he took up the reins. Olivia leaned against him briefly, savoring the solid strength of his shoulder against hers. "More than ready, Mr. Vance. Let's go build our home." With a flick of the reins, they set the oxen in motion, heading west toward the life that awaited them. The road would not be easy, the frontier never was, but they would face whatever came together, as equals. Their bond forged in the crucible of adversity and strengthened by mutual respect and deep love. The journey to Oregon took 6 weeks, longer than it might have with a larger wagon train, but Thomas kept his promise to take it slowly for Olivia's sake. They traveled through breathtaking landscapes, towering mountains, dense forests, rolling plains, and faced their share of challenges, from swollen rivers to sudden storms. Through it all, they worked as a team, each contributing their strengths to overcome obstacles. They reached the Willamette Valley in early June, when the land was lush with spring growth. Following the directions from Olivia's uncle's lawyer, they found the homestead nestled in a small valley with a creek running through it, just as the letters had described. The cabin was weathered but sound, a modest structure of logs and stone with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. Behind it stood a small barn and sheepfold, empty now but ready for livestock. As they stood together surveying what would be their home, Thomas slipped his arm around Olivia's waist. "What do you think? Is it what you imagined?" Olivia leaned into his embrace, her eyes taking in the apple trees in bloom near the cabin, the rich soil of the fallow fields, the distant mountains framing their valley. "It's better," she said softly, "because you're here with me." Thomas pressed a kiss to her temple. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." They wasted no time settling in, cleaning the cabin and making it habitable before turning their attention to the land. Thomas repaired fences and outbuildings while Olivia planted a vegetable garden, using seeds they had purchased in Snake River. Together, they acquired a small flock of sheep from a neighboring farmer, along with 2 milk cows and a dozen chickens. Their nearest neighbors, the Millers, lived 3 miles away and welcomed them warmly, offering advice about local conditions and introducing them to other settlers in the area. Olivia was pleased to discover that there were several families with children nearby, making her dream of starting a small school seem increasingly feasible. By their first anniversary, the homestead was flourishing. Thomas had proven to have a natural aptitude for sheep farming, and Olivia's garden produced abundantly. They had added a proper porch to the cabin and furnished it with a combination of items brought from Snake River and pieces Thomas crafted himself, revealing an unexpected talent for woodworking. "My father taught me," he explained when Olivia admired a chair he had made for her. "He said a man should know how to work with what the land provides." On a warm evening in August, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. Olivia leaned against Thomas's shoulder, his arm around her waist in what had become a familiar, comfortable pose. "You ever miss it?" she asked suddenly. "The freedom of the trail answering to no one, moving on whenever you pleased. Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering her question seriously as he always did. "Sometimes I miss the variety," he admitted. "Seeing new places, meeting different people, but I don't miss the loneliness or the feeling that I was always just passing through life instead of truly living it." He turned slightly to look into her eyes. "What we've built here, Olivia, it's real. It has substance. When I repair a fence or tend the sheep or add a room to our home, I'm not just doing a job and moving on. I'm building our future, our life together. That means more to me than all the freedom in the world." Olivia's heart swelled with love for this man who continued to surprise her with his depth of feeling and thoughtfulness. "I'm glad," she said softly, "because I have something to tell you that might tie you down even more permanently." Thomas raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Dr. Reynolds confirmed it yesterday when I went into town," Olivia said, a smile blooming on her face. "We're going to have a baby, Thomas, in February." For a moment, Thomas seemed frozen in place, his eyes wide with shock. Then a smile of such pure joy spread across his face that Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes in response. "A baby," he whispered, his hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Olivia covered his hand with her own. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Olivia, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted: a home, a purpose, your love, and now a family of our own. I'm overwhelmed." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair, "for breaking your leg and forcing me to slow down long enough to find what really matters." Olivia laughed through her tears. "That's a rather unconventional thing to be thankful for, Mr. Vance." "Well, I'm a rather unconventional man, Mrs. Vance," he replied with a smile, "but I'd break both my legs if it meant ending up here with you." Their son, Samuel Robert Vance, was born on a cold, clear February morning in 1875, with the assistance of Mrs. Miller, who had experience as a midwife. He had Thomas's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that promised to be as unruly as his father's. "He's perfect," Thomas whispered, holding his son for the first time, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "Absolutely perfect." Olivia watched them together, her heart so full of love it felt it might burst. "He is," she agreed softly, "and so are you, Thomas Vance." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Their homestead prospered, the sheep flock growing in size and quality under Thomas's careful management. Olivia started her school in the fall of 1876, teaching 8 children from neighboring farms in a small building Thomas constructed near their home. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's love of the outdoors and his mother's quick mind. He was joined by a sister, Eleanor Martha, in 1877, and another brother, James Thomas, in 1880. Their home expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Thomas adding rooms and improving the original structure until it barely resembled the modest cabin they had first encountered. In the summer of 1883, 10 years after Olivia's fateful fall on the trail to Oregon, the Vances hosted a gathering of neighbors and friends to celebrate the prosperity of their community. Tables laden with food stretched across their yard, and children played games on the grass while adults exchanged news and enjoyed the warm evening. As twilight approached, Olivia found Thomas standing slightly apart from the festivities, looking out over their land with a contemplative expression. She slipped her hand into his, following his gaze to where their sheep grazed peacefully on the hillside. Their children played tag with their friends, and the cabin, now a proper house, stood as testament to all they had built together. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" she asked. Thomas squeezed her hand gently. I was just remembering that day on the trail when Blackwell was ready to leave you behind. How close we came to never having all this. Olivia nodded, the memory still vivid despite the passage of time. I still don't know why you did it stayed with me, I mean. You barely knew me then. Thomas turned to face her, his blue eyes as warm and steadfast as they had been that first day when he'd fashioned a splint for her broken leg. I think, deep down, I already knew what you would come to mean to me. Some part of me recognized that you were worth slowing down for, worth changing my entire life for. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch still sending a flutter through her heart after all these years. And I've never regretted it for a moment. Olivia stood on tiptoe to kiss him softly. Nor have I. Even the broken leg seems worth it in retrospect. Thomas laughed, the sound mingling with the happy voices of their children and friends. Well, let's not go that far. I'd have preferred to court you without the medical emergency. But would you have noticed me otherwise? She teased. Just another settler on the wagon train heading west with dreams of independence. Olivia Vance, he said seriously, taking both her hands in his. I would have noticed you anywhere, under any circumstances. Some people are just meant to find each other, broken legs or not. As they rejoined their guests, Olivia reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment, the loss of her parents, the journey west, the accident that might have ended in tragedy, but instead led to the greatest happiness she had ever known. She had set out seeking independence, and found instead a partnership that enhanced rather than diminished her strength, a love that had only deepened with each passing year. That night, after the guests had gone and their children were asleep, Thomas and Olivia stood on their porch under a sky brilliant with stars, much as they had done countless nights before. He held her close, her head resting against his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. "Do you remember what you told me that day when Blackwell wanted to leave me behind?" she asked quietly. "When I asked why you were staying," Thomas nodded, his chin moving against her hair. "I said it was the right thing to do, and that I couldn't live with myself if I left you behind." Olivia smiled, remembering the simple honesty in his words that had touched her even through her pain. "I think I started falling in love with you in that moment." "Is that so?" he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And here I thought it was my expert Splint making that won your heart." She laughed softly. "That didn't hurt. Though I have to say, your patience during those long days of travel when you had to go at a snail's pace for my sake, that's what truly impressed me. Most men would have been frustrated, resentful even. Most men wouldn't have had you to talk to," Thomas pointed out. "Those conversations as we made our way to Snake River, learning about your dreams, your thoughts, your courage, those were worth any delay." Olivia turned in his arms to look up at his face, still handsome after all these years, with new lines of experience around his eyes and mouth that only made him more dear to her. "I love you, Thomas Vance, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Olivia Vance," he replied, his voice deep with emotion. "My brave, beautiful wife who taught me that slowing down can sometimes lead to the greatest adventures of all." As they stood together under the vast canopy of stars, Olivia thought about the long, unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment, a broken leg, a cowboy's kindness, and the slow, steady building of a life filled with love, purpose, and joy. It wasn't the independence she had imagined when she'd set out from Missouri all those years ago. It was something infinitely better, a partnership of equals, a family bound by love, a home created through shared vision and mutual respect. And it had all begun because a wagon master left her behind. A cowboy fashioned a splint. And together they had discovered that sometimes the most important journeys in life are the ones we take at a slower pace, side by side with the person who sees our strength even in our moments of greatest vulnerability.